Hey everyone, how's it going? This is the Bald Metal Nerd coming at you with another lovely video. Obviously, we're going to be talking about my favorite debut albums of all time in this one. Now, this is not a ranking video like my least favorite to favorite or anything like that. This basically, I'm going to be talking about. I'm going to group the albums together basically by tiers of importance. So basically, I'm gonna have the lowest tier. Basically, those are going to be albums that didn't impact the music scene a whole lot, but once I get towards the end of this list, we're definitely going to have some pretty monumental albums on here. Uh, so this is, like I said, no particular order, except maybe the final one I show might be my favorite debut album of all time. But anyway, let's go ahead and just dive right into this. First album on this list is Evil's Enter the Grave. Now, Evil is probably my favorite re-thrash band. They are absolutely fantastic. I love the hell out of them, and I really like what they're doing, with the classic thrash sound, but, updated a bit. So I think they're absolutely great, and hence that's why that album makes the list. Next one I'm going to show off. You could argue it had some impact on the metal scene back when this came out, but other bands have been doing this style of music. But I still think this is an absolutely amazing album, and then that is Down's NOLA, and this is my favorite Down album still. Of course, with this, you got the southern / groove metal sound. It's kind of like a mix between Corrosion of Conformity and Pantera, and some other elements just all mixed in together, and it's awesome. I love the hell out of this, but I don't know how impactful this was, whatever. But still an absolutely amazing album. Moving on. This is a sort of important speed metal album, but it's not the quintessential speed metal album or anything like that. And it is, again, probably my favorite album by this band. And I'm going to show Metal Church's debut album here, self-titled Metal Church. What can I say about this? It's an absolute classic. It's absolutely great. It's just kicks ass. Metal Church. Moving on, this one came out during the latter part of glam metal's heyday, and it was you guys may guess what this is. It was basically the first real album I ever listened to. They really started me towards the metal path, as it were. But I don't know how much. Again, it had some impact on the scene, but I don't think it was huge. And that is Skid Row's self-titled debut. I think this still holds up really well even now. I can listen to this anytime, and it's still great. Absolutely a barn burner, hard rock / glam metal record, one of the best. Okay, moving on. This next album I'm going to show off, arguing how important it is, I'm honestly not sure where it stands in the greater context of music overall. But I think it's a really great album, and that is 9 Inch Nails' Pretty Hate Machine. Obviously, this laid the groundwork for a lot of what Trent Reznor would do with 9 Inch Nails down the line, but this is definitely not his most impactful work. That, of course, would be The Downward Spiral, but this laid the groundwork for what he would do in the future, and how much influence just this album has, I'm not sure. So, anyway. After that, I'm going to talk now about albums I felt had, more of an impact. Definitely. Some of these are, again, it's going to be varying levels. So let's go ahead and talk about them. The first one of, I guess you'd call this middle tier of influence, is Machine Head's Burn My Eyes. And this is an absolutely stomping groove metal album. And to me, what Machine Head did is they kind of took what Pantera was doing at the time and took a little bit to the next level, right? It was a bit more heavier, a bit more refined than what Pantera was doing. And I absolutely love this. And I think Machine Head is mostly a terrific band. Mostly is the key word. They definitely have some not so great moments, but mostly they're terrific, and they really started things out with a bang on this. Plus, this album was a bright spot in American metal when American metal really needed a bright spot. I thought this, along with Fear Factory's Demanufacture, were absolutely a shot in the arm for American metal when it really needed one. So there's that. But the reason Fear Factory's album didn't make the list is Fear Factory's debut, Soul of a New Machine, meh at best. Not that great. So anyway, following that up with as far as important albums, Alice in Chains Facelift. This thing is, again, an absolute classic. Not their most impactful work, but I still think this had a pretty big impact on the early 90s, yes, metal scene, because in my opinion, this is a metal, not a hard rock album. In fact, I'd say Alice in Chains' first two albums, this and Dirt, would fall more on the metal side, even though they were lumped in with, quote, the Seattle sound and grunge. Their first two albums to me were fairly metal, but that's a whole discussion for another day. And this definitely had a huge impact on the scene when it hit. Now I'm going to show off something else that I felt. This is probably a debut from my favorite nu metal band, period. And I think this is absolutely great. And I think this had a pretty big impact on some of the nu metal stuff at the time, and that is System of a Down's self-titled debut. Absolutely amazing, and yeah, they absolutely deserve their place. Calling them nu metal is a bit of a misnomer. Their music was, well, frankly, more complicated than most nu metal, and more thought out, more intricate, all that. But they definitely get lumped into that. But and I think this did have an impact on the scene. Now, I thought about showing off Tool's Undertow, but I'm not sure. To kind of go with that, but I'm not sure if that counts as their debut or if their Opiate EP counts as their debut. Because if I have to say Opiate, that's definitely not one of my favorite debut albums or first appearances or whatever. But if we're going full albums, I guess Undertow would count, and that would make the list. That's the only reason I'm not showing it. I just thought I'd brought it up. They're kind of an honorable mention. If it's Undertow, it makes the list. Opiate doesn't. There you go. Anyway, now I'm going to show off a group of albums. Now, not all of these albums are historically significant. Some of them are, some of them aren't. But they all kind of fit together with a theme, and that theme is thrash. This is Overkill's Feel the Fire. And I don't think this had the impact of some of the other albums I'm going to show that fit in with this group. But holy crap, what an amazing start to an amazing career for Overkill. I mean, this is an absolutely killer debut from an amazing band. So there you go. Feel the Fire. And by the way, that's probably my favorite thrash debut of all time. Probably my second favorite thrash debut of all time is Testament's The Legacy. Again, maybe not super historically significant, because by the time these albums came out, thrash was a well-formed genre, and, not... These did kind of help with the second wave of thrash a bit, but they didn't really, form the genre up. But I think they had impact, just not as much as some of the other stuff I'm going to show. Now, honorable mention, before I move on, another one. Unfortunately, I don't own this one in physical form. I know, shame on me. I need to turn in my metal card. Exodus is Bonded by Blood. That album kicks a lot of ass as well, and is middle between important, I guess. But unfortunately, I don't have that one in physical form, so I can't show it. But it would make the list if I did have it. I'd be showing it. So, moving on. Megadeth's Killing Is My Business and Business Is Good. Absolutely fantastic. Not as historically significant as the next two albums I'm going to show. But still a killer thrash debut and a great start to Megadeth's career. So the next two albums I'm going to show were very historically significant in the development of thrash, because when these came out, thrash was a fairly new genre. I mean, I think there were some thrash albums before this. Yeah, there definitely were, but they didn't really solidify thrash, in my opinion, as much as these two albums did. And the impact on early thrash that these two albums had really can't be understated. Of course, I'm talking about two of the big four. We got Metallica's Kill 'Em All and Slayer's Show No Mercy. I think they're equally important because Metallica, of course, was the giant impact. I mean, it's Metallica. Come on, they pretty much wrote the book for thrash metal. And then you have Slayer, which, of course, penned another chapter in thrash metal. And then, of course, death metal, spout it off from them, black, all that stuff. So, yeah, I mean, these two, can't really overstate how important these two albums are. So now that we talked about, we're about to go into the top tier of important debut albums. And these are absolutely had a giant impact on the music scene. And, well, I guess I'll just dive right into it. First one in this top tier of importance is Guns N' Roses' Appetite for Destruction. Basically, what this album did is it took kind of a tired and waning glam metal scene and gave it a giant kick in the ass that it desperately needed at the time. Now this isn't really glam metal, but it's sort of it's real close. It's like flying close to the sun as far as that goes. It's not quite there. It's much more in the traditional hard rock category, but it does fly close to that glam metal sound. But it does have more edge to it, and really gave the rock scene a huge kick in the ass. And in fact, this album is so great, I think this alone earns Guns N' Roses a spot in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. The rest of their stuff after this, not nearly as great. Let's face it. This was like lightning in a bottle. But it's absolutely one of the best albums ever made, in my opinion. So, moving on from that one. I'm going to talk about an album that had a giant impact on metal. I would say this is probably one of the most important, what I would call second generation metal albums to make the list. And, and that would be Iron Maiden's self-titled debut, right? And what I consider second generation of metal kind of starts with Iron Maiden and the Nawabum bands, right? Or new wave of British heavy metal, for those who don't know what the hell that means. I would say that was the second generation of metal. To me, the first generation of metal consisted of, I'll explain that, I guess, when I show the next album, which is the last one on the list. Thank goodness, right? We're nearing the end of this video. And, of course, the final one can only be Black Sabbath's self-titled debut, right? This is the most important album, obviously, that I'm showing, and this is possibly my favorite debut album ever. Because not too many bands invent an entirely new genre of music with a debut album. That doesn't happen much nowadays, So this is absolutely an incredible work, incredibly important. I don't know what else to say about it, because Sabbath, along, honestly, in my opinion, with Judas Priest and Motorhead, I kind of consider them the big initial explosion of. They wrote the book for early heavy metal. And the reason I'm not showing a Judas Priest or Motorhead's debut albums is, well, I don't feel they're as good as the other albums I showed off. Both Motorhead and Judas Priest really came into their own on their second albums. They were, in my opinion, big improvements from their debuts. Especially Judas Priest. Motorhead's debut album was better than Judas Priest, but yeah, neither one of them. I didn't think their debuts were all that great, but Sabbath's debut. Wow, what an amazing piece of work! And what else can we really say about it? So that is basically it. Let me know in the comments below if you think there were any glaring omissions. The reason I didn't go on and on and on is because a lot of my favorite bands, I'm just going to be honest, a lot of their debuts, not the greatest thing ever made. A lot of bands take an album or two to really kind of come into their own. So that's it. As always, if you like this, thumbs up. If you don't, thumbs down, share, subscribe. That stuff actually really helps out. Thank you so much for watching. Live long and prosper.